I would like to thank all organizers and all participants of this important meeting. During my lecture of 25 minutes, I would like to review my lifelong research, as well as research by a number of our associates, on the historical 1935 argument by Einstein, Podolsky, and Rosen that, quote, quantum mechanics is not a complete theory, end of quote. In fact, as you can see, Einstein, Podolsky, and Rosen put the idea of the lack of completeness of quantum mechanics directly in the title of their historical paper. I would like also to draw your attention on how delicate and important is the word that was selected personally by Einstein, namely that quantum mechanics is incomplete, rather than suggesting the construction of a completely new mechanics. Instead, Einstein essentially suggested to search for what's missing in quantum mechanics. My studies on the EPR argument were presented for the first time in June 1965 at the defense of my PhD thesis in theoretical physics at the University of Torino, Italy. My main argument was then, and it is today, that it appears that quantum mechanics cannot represent consistently time-irreversible processes in physics, chemistry, and biology, because of the invariance of Lie algebra, as well all Lie symmetry, as well as Heisenberg time evolution under anti-hermeticity, with consequential conservation of the total energy. It then follows, in my view, that indeed quantum mechanics is incomplete for the consistent characterization, nuclear fusion, combustion, the growth of an embryo, and other processes in nature. The main point emerging from the defense of my PhD thesis in 1965 is that rather than disappearing at the elementary particle level, time-irreversible processes in physics, chemistry, and biology do appear to originate indeed at the ultimate, most elementary level in nature, because with the sole exception of the electron and the proton that are permanently stable particles, all other particles that have been discovered to date are indeed irreversible, because they decay spontaneously. Indeed, in the front page of the HADRONIC journal, which I founded in April 1978, when I was in the faculty of the Lyman Laboratory of Physics at Harvard University under DOE support, I did place indeed a picture illustrating the decay of the K meson, and I kept that picture in all subsequent issue of the HADRONIC journal for the subsequent 46 years of regular publication, in the hope that eventually colleagues may at least consider the problem of the ultimate origin of irreversibility in physics, chemistry, and biology. The problem that I confronted during my PhD studies in theoretical physics at the University of Torino in Italy in the mid-1960s was essentially that of how to bypass the symmetry under anti-hermeticity of this totally antisymmetric Lie bracket, the bracket of the Lie symmetry, as well as of Heisenberg time evolution law. The solution that I proposed, which has been published in the Nuovo Cimento of the Italian Physical Society of 1967, is essentially the following, and consists in sandwiching a new operator I call R in between A and R and H, and then sandwiching a different, very important, a different operator that I call S in between H and A, but therefore turning this totally antisymmetric bracket into these new brackets, which are neither totally antisymmetric nor totally symmetric, and therefore indeed they do fulfill the condition of not verifying the symmetry under anti-hermeticity. thus being suitable for being used for an irreversible completion of quantum mechanics. I then spent months of my life, as reported in this paper, which is part of my PhD thesis, at the mathematics library of the major European university to understand what type of algebra is this. It is evident that this algebra admits Lie algebra as a particular case, as a necessary condition for a completion of quantum mechanics. But in addition, the new brackets are called Lie admissible and Jordan admissible because they can be decomposed into the sum of brackets which are totally antisymmetric, which verifying all Lie algebra axioms, plus totally symmetric bracket which verify all Jordan algebra axioms. This jointly Lie admissible, Jordan admissible algebra, I believe I was the very first scientist to study them. And actually, this paper is the first paper ever to introduce an irreversible time evolution law of Lie admissible and Jordan admissible character in the physics literature. Then this new type of algebra are described in great detail in the second paper of my thesis, also published in Nuovo Cimento, that is recommended for generic audience. I should finally indicate that for this particular value of the R and S operator, which are nowadays called standard realization of the forward and backward Santillians, well, for those values, then the Lie admissible bracket reduces to a Lie isotopic bracket plus an extra term which has been proved to be the operator representative of the external forces F in Lagrange and Hamilton historical analytic equations. Consequently, I can say that Jordan algebra, which are directly responsible for the presence of this extra term, as I said, the Jordan algebra are the ultimate algebraic representative of the analytic origin of irreversibility, which was placed by historically as well known by Lagrange and Hamilton precisely in their external terms. I wrote several times in my papers and books that quantum mechanics has a majestic axiomatic structure. To be in line with historical EPR argument, my task was therefore that of attempting to locate a realization of the abstract axiom of quantum mechanics such to allow a representation of irreversibility, and therefore fulfilling Einstein's wish of searching for a completion of quantum mechanics. The completion that I propose is essentially the following. Quantum mechanics is based from an axiomatic viewpoint on the universal enveloping associative algebra based with the traditional associative product, which is millenary old. But this product has a hidden or a secret symmetry called symmetry under inversion, namely the product of A to B from the left is equal to B to A from the right. This freedom in the product is never used in quantum mechanics, but it is crucial for a irreversible realization of abstract axiom of quantum mechanics. In fact, I essentially proposed the ordering all product to the right and indicated with this symbol here, greater than, to indicate motion forward in time. And then I realized that this product in a generalized way by inserting the operator S in between all products. To represent motion backward in time, I ordered all products to the left. I indicated with the symbol less than, and I inserted the different operator R in between each and every product. What is in this way, I essentially divided conventional associative, universal associative algebra of quantum mechanics into two branches, one with ordered product to the right, one with ordered product to the left. In addition, I realized the associative product in a broader way with the insertion of the RNS operators. What is very important, each of those two products verify the condition of associativity. Therefore, from an abstract viewpoint, the universal enveloping associative algebra of quantum mechanics is algebraically and topologically equivalent to the enveloping algebra of hadronic mechanics, since the latter is merely given by the Kronecker product of two universal enveloping algebra, only they are iso-associative. I published this proposal in a paper that I wrote when I was visiting the Department of Mathematics of Harvard University, visiting from the Department of Physics. Let us briefly review the operational part of hadronic mechanics. As we all know, particle physics of the 20th century was dominated to a considerable extent by symmetries and conservation laws. I here present the first paper that I wrote at Harvard University, published in 1978, which presents a broader notion of Lie admissible symmetries and consequential time rate of variation of physical observable, which I consider to be a necessary condition for a consistent representation of all energy releasing processes. This broader notion was technically possible by the iso-associative character of the envelope of hadronic mechanics, which allow me a broadening of the Poincaré-Birkhoff-Witt theorem with a consequential rigorous definition of exponentiation in the new envelope and consequential new Lie admissible realization of the axiom of a Lie group. When the parameter in the Lie admissible transformations is time and this numeric value is infinitesimal, then this Lie admissible transformation reproduces identically the Heisenberg-Santilli Lie admissible equations that we discussed before. The use of an iso-unitary transformation in accordance with isomathematics, then allow me the unique and unambiguous formulation of the forward and backward Schrödinger-Santilli iso equations. I reproduce here only the forward expression because in practical application we always ignore the backward version, since the irreversibility is assured by when the Santillians R and S have different values. The part of this equation which is important for an understanding of the following presentation is the multiplicative character of the Santillian, the forward Santillian S to the Hamiltonian. So the Santillian multiplies the Hamiltonian, but is not additive, as a result of which the Santillian cannot possibly represent any potential interaction. In fact, the primary role of the Santillian is to represent, as we shall soon see, is to represent the actual size and dimension of proton and neutron, as well as strongly interacting particles in general, as well as, perhaps most importantly, to represent the new interaction which emerged from the experimentally established partial mutual penetration of proton and neutron in a nuclear structure, with ensuing component of the nuclear forces which are expected to be non-linear, non-local, and non-potential. A technical understanding of the following scientific and industrial application of hadronic mechanics requires a knowledge of at least the following representative 7 papers. I will now briefly review the proposal for the new species of pseudonuclei, which are a bond between ordinary electrons and the natural nuclei, resulting in this structure. And this hypothesis is based on the Coulomb attraction between electron and nuclei, which is simply astronomical in value. We're talking about thousands of newtons. Keeping in mind that Newton is a macroscopic unit of measurement, part of the measurements of the torque of a Ferrari. So when we applied the 1,000 of the Newton to the tiny electrons, you can imagine the strength of the Coulomb attraction. Despite that, quantum mechanics prohibits this bond because of the uncertainty principle, since it predicts superluminous speed or energy way beyond those admitted by nuclei. Hadronic mechanics, on the contrary, not only predicts the existence of pseudonuclei, but also allows their quantitative treatment in a time invariant way. Here, but just summarize the main idea. You select a non-unitary transformation, you put it equal to the forward ISO unit, which is the inverse of the Santillian, and this in this case is the product of two 4x4 matrices representing the shape and dimension of the nuclei or the electron cloud, and the fourth element being the density. The important point here is the exponent of this forward ISO unit, which is essentially given by the ratio between the Halton potential and the Coulomb potential. Do a little calculation, and the Santillian becomes extremely small, much smaller than the Planck constant. Then you apply the same transformation to the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, and you see that now becomes equal to ½ of the Santillian, which tends to 0. In particular, is very small for ordinary nuclei, becomes much smaller in the core of star, and then finally it becomes 0 in the interior of black holes, in full recovering of Einstein determinism in this case for nuclear processes. The treatment of pseudonuclei via hadronic mechanics is truly elementary, particularly when projected in a conventional Hilbert space, that is prior to its full formulation via isomathematics. You consider first a conventional Schrödinger equation between a positive charge and a negative charge, and you subject that equation to the non-unitary transformation we have just shown a moment ago. And then you write down explicitly the form of the Santillian, and then you end up to the addition of a Halton potential to the Coulomb potential. However, the Halton potential is so strong at short distances to absorb the Coulomb potential, so that this equation, also called the Schrödinger-Santilli ISO equation, this equation can be well approximated as only having the Halton potential. What is important here for this lecture is the value of the eigenvalue of the Halton potential, namely the value of the eigenvalue of non-potential variation in non-self-adjoint forces. In all cases that we have studied, with no exception I know as of today, this eigenvalue is identically 0. Namely, the totality of the binding energy are characterized by the electromagnetic interactions. The Santillian and its representation of non-potential, non-linear, non-local, and other non-conventional interaction, essentially they affect the dynamics and several other aspects of nuclear structure. Needless to say, for a large protonic number, the total charge of the nucleus remains positive, and therefore they are not that much interesting for the study of nuclear fusion. However, for nuclei with a small number of protons, then the situation is different. Here we show the pseudo-deuteron, which has a negative charge, -1, as a result of a bond between an electron pair in singlet coupling and a natural conventional deuteron. It is interesting to see that the existence of pseudonuclei appears to be recently confirmed, of course in a preliminary way, by a group of scientists from Russia, in which they use a tungsten bar as an electrodes subjected to a very powerful electric DC discharge, and then on the spectroscopy they noticed that here they detected the increase of the mass of a number of isotope of the tungsten, therefore confirming the bond between electrons and the tungsten nuclei to form the pseudonuclei, of course in a preliminary way to be independently confirmed. Hyperfusions are controllable and sustainable nuclear fusions between negatively charged pseudonuclei and positively charged ordinary nuclei, therefore without any Coulomb barrier. Here we show two of the hyperfusion that we have measured repeatedly, both of them occurring without any emission of harmful radiation and without any release of radioactive waste. The first is the hyperfusion between the negatively charged pseudo-deuteron and the ordinary deuteron, of course, that will, in singlet coupling, which occur naturally, into the helium, and the release of a rather substantial amount of clean energy of the range of 28 million electron volts. The second one is the hyperfusion of the nitrogen, which we have also measured several times, which releases 10 million electron volts, and then there are several others. The hyperfusion are realized into specifically designed reactor, which are called hadronic reactor, because they are designed according to the laws of hadronic mechanics. They essentially consist of a metal vessel containing a gas in its interior at pressure, in this case, deuterium, a commercially available gas. And this gas is traversed by a pair of electrodes, which are usually carbon electrodes. Both gap is controlled from the outside, and power, of course, from the outside with a very special DC power. The gap is controlled, the pressure is controlled, the temperature is controlled with automatic disconnection. So the instant the power is removed, everything ceased. There is no activity to occur that can possibly occur. This picture illustrates our hadronic reactor for the hyperfusion of the helium and of the nitrogen. You can see the reactor itself here on the left with yellow flanges. This is the bottle of the deuterium hadronic fuel. This is a specially modified, commercially available the AC-DC converter. Then there are various controls not included here because they are remote. I constructed this reactor and I was chief scientist of Thunder Energy Corporation in the 2008, and the reactor worked for about 8 years. I here report 3 independent certification of excess energy produced by the reactor without any harmful radiation and without any release of radioactive waste. The first was done by the Princeton Gamma Spectroscopy instruments. Here you can see the crew of the entire company that came, the scientists came to our lab, and with their own neutron detector and other instruments, and the first thing that they did, they certified that indeed the reactor will produce no harmful radiation whatsoever. Then they did an extensive series of calorimetric measurement that then certified indeed in various scientific papers, which are listed in the first one, that indeed the reactor produced a multiple of thermal energy compared to 40 kilowatt of original electric energy that was used. The second certification was from scientists, from nuclear physicists from Canada, who came again to our lab and certified exactly they certified essentially what the first certification contained, and the third one was from nuclear physicists from India, but they could not come to our lab. So the third certification was essentially at a distance. I recommend to all skeptics to read indeed the certification prior to venturing any judgment. Our reactors are called dragons by our technicians because they do actually spit fire unless one is not careful in handling and without taking the necessary precautions. I here showed the Dragon number 3, which is the third of an expected longer series of a hadron reactor conceived, designed and constructed for the hyperfusion of silicon-28 from carbon-12 and atmospheric oxygen 16 mixed with nitrogen and other gases. As you can see, this reactor is equipped with a turbine showing to prove the sustainability of the reactor, virtually that can operate virtually indefinitely. However, the reactor was not equipped with an electric generator, so at least not in the Dragon number 3. Now, following extensive tests and measurement, also independently certified, the reactor proved to produce 100 kilowatt of thermal, I repeat, thermal energy in excess of the 40 or 50 kilowatt of electric energy used for its operation. Out of this 100 excess kilowatt of thermal energy, we were hoping to produce 10 to 20 kilowatt of actually clean electric energy with the addition of a turbine. But with the remaining 80 kilowatt of thermal heat was expected to be lost in atmospheric heat. This link provides a video that presents a detailed description of all components of the reactor as well as of its operation. In this recent paper, I provide all data elaboration that produce the indicated 100 kilowatt of excess thermal energy. Unfortunately, I cannot reproduce them or review even minimally here due to their complexity. This reactor was put in storage at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, but unfortunately it was completely lost 1 year ago because submerged by seawater, and therefore with all equipment virtually gone from any possibility of recuperating, and due to the hurricane Helene that indeed was hit the area, including my personal house on the Florida Canal. We are now in the process of building a much more advanced Dragon number 4, but with this time equipped from the beginning with a turbine-operated electric generator. But that will take time, not only for its construction, but also for all the necessary tests that are required by the project. I shall finally indicate that the hyperfusion reactors are also useful for a number of, I believe, to be important industrial applications. Let me mention 3 of them while I remain at the disposal of anybody interested for the more detailed discussion. First, the same reactor for hyperfusion can be used to sterilize liquid biowaste and for the production of fertilizer, as well as the joint production of clean gaseous fuel. Number 2, the same reactor can be used for the gasification of ordinary petroleum as it comes out from the ground. However, mixed with water, which means we can control the percentage of oxygen in the exhaust. And this, because of the conversion of petroleum and water into the fuel known as ammonia gas. Finally, I shall also indicate that exactly the same reactor appears to be suitable for the gasification, I should say more technically, for a sublimation of plastic bottles when they are crushed down to small pieces and again mixed with water, and then the entire system is gasified again into fuel whose purity of the exhaust can be controlled from its very design. In this final slide, I would like to indicate very briefly the possibility of recycling radioactive nuclear waste, which are permitted by hadronic mechanics. Let me state in advance that since radioactive nuclear waste cannot be transported in public area, the only possible recyclers are those done by the nuclear power plant themselves. But then the only possible recyclers are nuclear transmutation from nuclear waste with a life of hundreds of thousands of years down to seconds. This is the only possibility I can, for as effectively, with any possible, at least a potential of industrial application that I can see. I should also indicate that we did no test whatsoever on radioactive nuclear waste because they can only be handled by national laboratories. So therefore, everything I present is purely theoretical. It's just a theoretical prediction. However, I shall indicate there have been a number of verification of what I am about to say, done, however, with the transmutation done via an ordinary and natural element that are not radioactive. Well, let me show at least 3 of them. The first is by neutron irradiation via our directional neutron source that releases neutron with very low energy. So it's very easy to see here for this one single reaction that one single neutron will transform cesium, which is one of the elements of the radioactive nuclear waste, which is cesium 55 and 35, into the barium, which is stable. The next one is by irradiation with what we call a resonating photon. The electron is a physical, actual, permanently stable, actual constituent of the neutron. Therefore, when it is hit by a photon with a very special frequency, which we call resonating frequency, then the electron is just spit out. Therefore, this is essentially a stimulated beta decay. This has been preliminarily verified by the group of nuclear physicists in Greece, headed by Professor Tsagas. And finally, I would like to mention the irradiation of radioactive nuclear waste by the pseudoproton. What is the pseudoproton? Well, it is a new, strongly interacting particle, which has essentially the weight and the characteristics of the proton, except that it is negatively charged proton. Well, it is considered to be inevitable in the core of star, because the star, after synthesizing the neutron, they, in an environment extremely hot, with 10 to the third, Celsius of the temperature, containing electrons and neutron, then they also the fusion of electron and neutron is inevitable, of course, with a fraction much smaller than that of the neutron itself, but still with half-life of the order of seconds, therefore with an industrial capability. Now, we have also tested this preliminarily by using the US highly advanced mass spectroscopic laboratory. It appears that with pseudoproton can be reproduced in laboratory. The interesting point that being a strongly interactive particle with a negative charge, it immediately once it is attracted by nuclei. So the absorption is inevitable, and therefore it decreases the proton number by 1 unit by turning again the same cesium into a stable baryon. In remarks, I would like to say that an important function of hadronic mechanics has been that of showing that the dike, which is represented by quantum mechanics, has been broken. And therefore, now there is an entire horizon of new possibility at the mathematical, theoretical, industrial level that are simply inconceivable if one remains within the framework of quantum mechanics. So therefore, I hope that those are stimulating the curiosity of at least some of you. Thank you for your attention.